Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Solid topic? Somewhat not safe for work, but not bad. Let's do it. What paranormal experiences have you witnessed? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Not sure if this is considered paranormal, but when I get fevers as a child, I would always, in my fugue and pain-infused state, hear a man counting in a very deep voice. He would count from 1 and up. As the numbers get larger, the voice gets louder and more intense. It started to get less frequent as I grew older, too, and now I do not experience it anymore. I've brushed it aside as a recurring nightmare until only recently, 3. I've learned that my sister would experience the exact same thing when she was younger as well. It's not the scariest thing, but it does send shivers down my spine, trying to comprehend this. 4. I work in a cemetery. One evening I had stayed late to do some catch-up work. I was taking pictures of some granite samples to have on my phone and had already locked up. I was alone. As I was holding my phone, I heard the doorway to the basement swing open, slam shut, and heard footsteps go down the stairs. I froze. I thought for sure someone had come in. I called out to see if it was someone from maintenance. No reply. I got scared because if it wasn't them, someone had broken in. I stayed still for a bit and listened, then called out again. Nothing. Finally, I got brave enough to look. No one there. I peeked down the basement. Empty. All the doors were still locked. When I was 3, I told my parents that my great-grandmother came to me in a dream and said her feet didn't hurt anymore. I think she had problems due to diabetes or something. She had died that night. They received the call shortly after I told them. Not paranormal, but a spooky coincidence. I went with my best friend during high school for a summer vacation to his grandparents who live in the countryside in Japan. I stayed in his mom's old room, which has a small wall closet. Just above this closet was a small closet door, like 1.5 feet tall and about 3 feet wide, just above it. Weird design, but their house is old. The first couple weeks I was pretty jet-lagged, and Japan is hot and humid, so I didn't really sleep at night. If my light was off at night, though, I always felt uneasy about that small closet space. Something about it just felt darker than the rest of the room. Toward the end of the second week, I started to adjust to the time difference. One morning I woke up and the small door was open. It was unsettling, but I closed it and just thought maybe it wasn't closed all the way and came loose. A couple nights later, I woke up feeling uneasy. It was dark, and I could kinda see, and I could see that the small door was open. It was much darker than the rest of the room, like black, pitch dark. This was the first and only time I experienced paralysis. I was too scared to move, say, or do anything. I just felt this darkness coming from there. I don't remember sleeping that night, but I must have, because I remember waking up the next morning. I told my friend about it, who said his mom told him about something like that too. When we got back home and I talked to his parents, his mom kinda joked with me. So I heard you met the ghost. Well, ghosts and haunted closets notwithstanding, summer in Japan sounds awesome. When I was 6, I slept on a bunk bed in a room alone. The bottom bunk was empty. It was meant for my younger brother, but he was too scared of sleeping in a bed alone. So I was alone in that room that night. I remember a chilling feeling that night, then it suddenly got really warm, probably because I was undergoing a night terror of some sort. Then I start breathing heavily and open my eyes and see the room is empty. My little nightlight in the corner of the room comforts me back to sleep, except as I close my eyes I felt a heavy hand petting my shoulder. My eyes rip open and there was no one in the room. As soon as I lay back down, the petting continued, and I covered my head, just pretending to myself that it was my mom. It took me 12 years to stop sleeping with my head under the covers because of that memory. My mom, of course, knew a woman passed away in that apartment before we moved in, so she always believed it was that woman trying to comfort me. My parents had flown to Houston when I was 11 years old to see a specialist for my dad's lymphoma. It had just returned from remission, but there was no reason to think he was in any imminent danger. I was riding my bike home the day they were to fly back and stopped my bike in this ditch we used to ride down or up on our way back. When I got to the top, I felt a wave of emotion come over me, and without even knowing what I was saying, I told my friend I was riding with that my dad had just died. My friend was like, "What?" I just knew. I rode the rest of the way home to find my grandparents, my dad's parents, bawling on our back porch. I stood there watching them in the doorway for a few minutes, unable to walk out to talk to them. He had died an hour before I got home from school. No phone calls to the school, nor did I interact with anyone that knew prior to riding in the ditch. I just knew when that wave came over me. Again, there was no reason to think he was even remotely close to passing. He had caught pneumonia while in Houston. Died from that. I might not believe in everything, but I truly believe that there is no doubt that we have some type of connection to certain people that goes beyond our understanding. And I'm not going to apologize for it either. My family's old house backed onto a pretty substantial forested ravine. I slept on the ground level floor, and my room was at the back of the house. On 4 separate occasions over the span of 5 years, I saw a middle-aged man dressed in a flannel shirt, blue jeans, and a red hat walk through my room with a dog leash in his hand. He would briefly stop at the same spot every time and look around, then keep walking toward the ravine. I should note that this was fairly new construction in a suburb of a small city, and all that had been there previously was forest. I think he lost his dog in the ravine at some point, and he was there trying to find it. One weekend I was at my dad's house. He had come to the upstairs bathroom to get a shave and heard footsteps in my stepsister's room. I thought it was him walking around initially, so I got up to find him standing at her closed door. He looks back at me and whispers, "You can hear that too, right?" I nodded, and he opened the door slowly. My stepsister was asleep and never had been awake apparently. There was no way she could have crossed the room, gotten into bed, and pretended to be that convincingly asleep in the 2 seconds it took my dad to open the door. He went in, checked her TV, which had never been on. She had one of those big ones from the 90s that would get warm when turned on. The radio hadn't been on either. Figured maybe it was the beat of a song or something. After that, we heard the footsteps a bunch of times, usually very early in the morning. Some of the footsteps were so heavy, they'd shake the ceiling fan on the dining room directly under her bedroom, and they'd woken her up a few times as well. Whenever I'd shower at my dad's, I always felt like someone was standing behind me. Eventually, I got so stressed and paranoid that I refused to shower at the house or even go into the upstairs bathroom. My dad asked me one day, "Do you ever feel like someone's in the shower with you when you're here?" After months of me feeling that way and never mentioning it to anyone. I used to have a recurring nightmare about a skinny tall man in a trench coat slowly walking towards me. He had his creepy cold face burned into my brain, pretty common stuff. Years and years later, I was coming home from college, called the elevator, door opens, and I almost shit myself. That skinny tall man in a trench coat is looking straight at me from the mirror. I don't know how a child's brain can predict exactly what they will look like in their youth, but yeah, she was creepy. My dad was in the hospital with a serious brain tumor. The hospital was about 40 miles from me, and he was in no shape to even keep awake. One night I was chatting to a friend on MSN, them days, yep, and he asked how my dad was. I turned to my left and I saw him sat in his chair just looking at me. I replied, "Think he's okay." Sat in the room with me. To which my friend said, "Isn't he in hospital?" I looked again and nothing. I never mentioned it to anyone. Told my friend I must have been seeing things. Dad survived and still here today. Cut to about 21 years later, and I met up with my dad and just started having a chat. He says, "Something's been on my mind for years, son, and can't shake it off. When I was in hospital, I remember being at home, sitting in my chair. You were on the computer and you looked at me. Then I woke up in the hospital, but it felt too real to be a dream." That's when I told him my experience. Attended a school back in 2013-2014 that was so haunted I still don't believe it. Me and many other students, but also some of the teachers working there, saw things go flying in the air, heard footsteps, were sometimes touched by something we couldn't see, and had various new and expensive equipment. Myself, I had an iPhone 5 and a fully spec'd late 2012 iMac at the time, fail whenever the ghost entered the room we were in, and so on. The various tech problems all disappeared as soon as I left the school and took my stuff back home with me, by the way. The iMac, still in use today by my uncle, and he experiences no issues with it to this date. So, to my first serious experience at that school, one night I was alone with a girl at my student house, everyone else was partying down at the school building, when suddenly we started hearing footsteps from the attic upstairs. It was a tiny room up there that was only big enough for storing some tour and hiking equipment, like a few backpacks and such. After maybe half a minute or so, the footsteps started coming down the stairs from the attic. At this point, me and my friend went dead silent, and we were both just staring toward the door that went to the attic. The footsteps came all the way down and went into the living room where we were sitting. At this point, the sound of the footsteps switched from sounding like someone walked around in big boots into what to me sounded more like someone coming in wet and barefoot out of the shower or tub. When the sound got to the middle of the room, which was right in front of where me and this girl were sitting, it stopped, and for a few brief moments there was nothing but dead silence. The girl and I just looked at each other for like 5 to 10 seconds, before my eyes caught something going on behind the girl's back. We were sitting in a couch together, and behind her were these huge windows that were from the floor and all the way up to the ceiling. They had some seriously huge blinds as well, and so I watched this pretty heavy lead thing that certain industrial blinds have be lifted all the way up from the floor to just above the middle of the window. There, it kept floating in the air for about 5 seconds, before it was punched into the window with such force that I'm sure that window would have broken, if it hadn't been for those thick blinds protecting it. The girl, I didn't see this as it happened behind her back, but you can be sure that she heard the noise. In fact, she got so scared that she literally jumped into my lap screaming. That's the moment when I stopped trying to give possible natural explanations to everything paranormal. Creepy footsteps that go right up to you. It's pretty wild. You guys ever hear anything like that? At my mom's old apartment, I used to have this feeling I was always being watched. Then I was starting to wake up at 3 a.m. consistently. On one of the nights I had woken up, I heard someone call out my name. It was a woman's voice, but I didn't recognize it. She kept calling out my name and walking towards my bed, getting closer, but I didn't see anything. I freaked out, jumped off my bed, and ran into my brother's room. I hopped into bed with him and tried waking him up. The punk sleeps like the dead. He still sleeps like that. I heard her footsteps follow me until his doorway. After that, every time I woke up in the middle of the night, I just ran into his room and slept on the top bunk. We had bunk beds. My mother still doesn't believe that happened. Thankfully, we only lived there for a couple of months, then moved out. One time I woke up in the middle of the night and I checked my phone to see the time, and then I was about to lay down and close my eyes. I checked in front of me and a huge tall humanoid figure was standing there blocking the view of a broken wall clock, and I just started panicking, and it still was there after many seconds and eventually just disappeared after I looked away from it for a second. I don't believe in paranormal activity, but my grandparents' house is considered by many to be extremely haunted. It's part of a tour of haunted houses in LA area, and according to legend, was part of the inspiration for American Horror Story. There are tons of stories, but the one I experienced myself was when I was living there as a child. I was about 6 years old, and my older sister was 12, and we shared a room. My mom had decorated our bedside table with an antique telephone that didn't work and was not plugged in. My sister and I were asleep, and for some reason we both woke up at the same time and turned to face each other. I remember feeling an extreme feeling of dread. Then the police rang and the phone rang in between us. We locked eyes and both hid under our blankets till it stopped ringing. We both thought it was a dream because we didn't pay anything for years about it. Then, one day, she was talking about it, and we realized we had had the exact same experience. There are so many more stories, but that's the only one I experienced directly.